Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining this webinar. On behalf of the Pulmonary Circulation Women's Working Group, as well as the Early Career Working Group, we are very excited to have this panel of experts talk to us about maximizing time efficiency and managing one's priorities. I'm going to introduce our panelists and then my co-moderators. So we'll start with Dr. Natalie Bauer, who's an associate professor and assistant dean for admissions and the chair of the Continuous Quality Improvement Committee at the University of South Alabama. She also serves as the chair of the American Pulmonary Circulation Assembly Planning Committee. Next, we have Dr. Sonia Flores, who is a professor of medicine and microbiology at the University of Colorado School of Medicine. She's also the program director for the Graduate Experiences for Multicultural Students program and the co-director for the Cardiovascular Pulmonary Training Grant. We also are joined by Dr. Corey Ventitolo, who's a professor of medicine and health services, policy and practice, and is the director of the Division of Pulmonary Critical Care and Sleep Medicine at Brown University Health and the Warren Alpert Medical School of Brown. And she's also the inaugural director of the Center for Advanced Lung Care, as well as the chair of the Pulmonary Circulation Assembly for the American Thoracic Society. And last but not least, Dr. Ki Yuan is an assistant professor at Boston Children's Hospital and Harvard Medical School. She is a fellow of the American Heart Association and is the inaugural chair of the ATS Pulmonary Circulation Assembly for the Women's Working Group. So thank you all for joining. My co-moderators are Dr. Larissa Shimoda, Dr. Sue Gu, and Dr. Navneet Singh. And Larissa, if you want to take it from here.
Yeah, it's great to have everybody here for this webinar. We're hoping to learn a lot from our panelists. So I'd like to kick off with the first question. All of us face a lot of competing interests. We have grants that we're writing or papers that we're trying to get out the door. There's mentoring, committees, clinical service. I guess a question for all of you is, how do you set your priorities?
You want me to go first?
Sure.
Sure, I'll go first. So I'm probably the oldest one here in this group. So I'm actually going to be retiring early next year. So, I'm on my way out. But, given the fact that I started my career as a scientist when I was a graduate student at University of South Alabama, where Natalie is, I can tell you that I'm originally from Puerto Rico. So I moved after I graduated from college. I moved to Alabama to go to graduate school there. And it was an interesting program. And I don't know, Natalie, whether it was like that when you went through it. But, we had to take all of the same classes as medical students, even though, we were PhD students. So it was incredibly hard. And, in contrast to the medical students, we couldn't get anything less than a B. So it was an added pressure on us. So to make it even worse for me is, I had just gotten married about 2 years before. My husband actually was recruited to Mobile because he's an engineer and they had the corporate engineering offices of International Paper Company. And that's how we ended up there. And it was very hard because we didn't know anybody. And then I think it was right before I started my PhD, I had a daughter. And, that was incredibly hard because finding daycare was almost impossible. So, and my husband actually was also in the Army Reserve, so he was gone for a lot and traveling a lot for International Paper Company. So I essentially was a single mother for a lot of the time. So what did I do? So what I would do is, during the week, obviously I couldn't go into the anatomy lab because I also had to take gross anatomy. So what I would do is during the weekends, I would find someone who would take care of my daughter, and I would spend the whole weekend going through the anatomy lab, going through the cadaver. So it was incredibly hard, and I don't know how I made it, but I made it. And then my husband would come back, and he would take care of everything in the house, right? He would do the laundry, he would cook, not very good cooking, but that allowed me to spend a lot of time studying. Like, again, Natalie knows it was incredibly hard for those of you who have gone through medical school. I mean, those classes are incredibly intense. And this was at a time when, you didn't have the integrated curriculum that you have now. So they were like separate disciplines. Again, I mean, I just had to do what I could do whenever I had a little bit of time. And many times as a graduate student, and you're not allowed to do this anymore, but I would bring my daughter into the lab. And I even had a little playpen in the lab where she would sit there. And when she was actually a little bit older, I would give her the sales book and she would just sit there looking at the pages. And, one way or another, I made it through. So, sometimes you just have to deal with, family issues that but I was determined that nothing would stop me from getting my PhD. But I obviously couldn't spend as much time in the lab as other people could because, again, I had a young daughter and my husband was traveling a lot. So that's how I managed to um, make it through by, and again, I don't know if my daughter ever felt that I wasn't there for her, but she's a physician now, so I guess I did a good job. So, that's what I did. And I'm sure that a lot of young investigators and young faculty members have to deal with that. I mean, we just went through that with some of the panelists here, is that, we have family responsibilities. And frankly, for me, my kids always came first. So I'm sorry if I took too long.
No, not at all. Thank you, Sonia. So I'll chime in here too. So similar to Sonia, obviously, we went through the same program at a little bit different time. And I actually met Sonia when I was a postdoc in Colorado. Was the first time I knew of her, but it was the first time we got to interact and we got to be good friends while I was in Colorado. But tagging on to what she said, I think the hardest times were when my children were small. I was a little further along. I had finished a first postdoc when I had my daughter, but I got really lucky in that I had that support system in Mobile when I came back here. And I also had wonderful technical staff and wonderful secretarial staff in my department. So there were times that my daughter came to work and well, I had a technician who is a long-term friend now, and she's actually my daughter's godmother, because she spent some time babysitting her while I had to be in the lab. And the same was with some of the staff, some of whom are still here. They've retired and come back to work part-time, so they've gotten to see her grow up as well. But I think as far as prioritizing, the reality is family does come first. And then when you start talking about how you plan the chunks of your day, how do you plan how to get a paper done and how to get a grant done, and then how to write a white paper for admissions and how to analyze admissions data versus this. For me, sometimes it just comes down to the deadlines. I work from a calendar. I am a big time Google Calendar person. That is my new favorite tool. For years, I was a paper person. But what I use Google Calendar for now is I can actually tell it, I need you to remind me of this a month ahead of time. I need you to remind me of this. It's coming up in 3 weeks. If I have a lecture to give, I use it to say, hey, this is next week. And so I know I need to pull that slide set out and start refreshing. So that's kind of one of the tools I use to prioritize, is just really by deadline, setting it in a calendar and working backwards. A lot of that comes from learning myself and how long it takes me to do a task. The other tool that I use to prioritize now is I'm a big time bullet journal person, which I learned from some of my younger colleagues who I literally sat down with 2 ATSs ago. I found out they were using these and I said, I'll take you to lunch. You bring your bullet journal and you tell me how it works. And so that's what I did. I sat down with Jamie and Rebecca. They brought their bullet journals. I bought them lunch, and we sat there and we had like a 2-hour bullet journal session of how they use theirs, how they incorporated it into their lives, what kind of notes they kept, how they indexed it. So that's the other thing is lean on your friends. Go to things like this and ask these questions. Well, how do you do that? How do you get that done? How do you get to your email? So that's two tips and tricks from Dr. Bauer.
That's fantastic. Kay, do you have any tips to add?
Well, I really feel honored to come back as a panelist. I used to be one of organizers, and I'm so glad to join and also learn from other panelists how to use my time more efficiently. And as Dr. Bauer indicating about this new technology, I found some of the apps now. It's very helpful, like Slack or some others like Monday and some others. These can remind you, like you can set up those goals, and these app can constantly remind you, have you finished your goal? What's the progress? So I'm trying to use these apps to help me, but I also depend on the calendar a lot. And I would say, so setting up the priorities is also very helpful. Like if you're writing a grant, usually our grant will turn in, get reviewed, and that, doing revision, it could be a whole year long process. So I usually would like to plan these ahead of time and setting up the budget, stuff like that. So we can call this is more time sensitive task. And also I feel getting the paper, writing about the manuscript, it's also can fit in your timeline. If it's, your fellows about to apply K awards, they need paper get published. So these can get more priority. Yeah, that's just some 2 cents from me.
Great, thanks, Kay. And Corey, do you have any tips?
Well, first of all, I want to thank you all for organizing this. I think it's incredibly important, and it's a pleasure and an honor to be asked. And yeah, a half an hour before I was supposed to be here, we had to take my daughter to the pediatrician, so I thought I was going to have to cancel. But it does take a village, and so I think tip number one is to always kind of, no matter what your family or support network may look like outside of work, to have a kind of group of people around you that you could tap into for help, because I think modern life is challenging in that way. So I would say, as a physician scientist, the things that have helped me along the way are to be sure that I'm always thinking about alignment. So anything that I've taken on, my primary area of interest is obviously pulmonary vascular disease, but I always try to see, okay, if I'm going to take on this area clinically, or this role clinically or administratively, how can I work to also enhance the research and the training mission alongside the work that I'm doing here clinically? And if you think about that at the outset, it can really be helpful for programmatic building, working collaboratively across teams, increasing your institutional influence. And then ultimately you have kind of teams working on things. And I think it helps to increase output. The other thing, I'm still on paper, but what I've done, which I think is really incredibly helpful, is I don't think about work-life balance. I think about integration. So I think I put like my dry cleaning on the same to-do list as reviewing a manuscript, so that I just see the totality of what I need to do. And I try to think in 1 week, 3 month, 6 month blocks. And I try to also think upfront about what the rate limiting step in every project is going to be. And if I know that I have to put this out there to try to get this collaboration off the ground now, if I want to do this 6 months from now, you sort of get that pot cooking and then turn your attention on something that, needs to be completed potentially in the next 3 months. So I think trying to throw some stuff up against the wall and see what sticks as you're working on other projects that are coming to fruition has been effective for me.
Fantastic. Those are all great tips. I think we'll switch gears just a little bit. And, we live in an AI world now. You can't do anything or go anywhere without hearing about AI. And so I guess I'd like to ask all the panelists, do you use AI at all? Are there any tools that you found that are helpful to increase your productivity?
I can go again as the oldest one on this panel. I'm not that great with technology, but I use AI. And the funny thing is that I have a Pride program and it's all about health AI and data sciences. So, my scholars actually study all that, but I don't use AI as much other than, to be honest with you, when I write a grant or even a paragraph, I use AI just to correct my grammatical mistakes. And that's about the extent of how much I use AI.
Yeah, so I am kind of a new adopter of ChatGPT. I don't use it scientifically really, but I do use it in a lot of my admissions work right now and in CQI. So right now, our school will be undergoing our accreditation process next fall. So we are actively putting together our data collection instrument for the LCME. So those types of things, I'm perfectly happy to kind of task ChatGPT with. I had to develop a pretty much de novo admissions handbook this year because the one my predecessor had developed was just really out of date for modern admissions practices. So I would take the elements from the data collection instrument, I would write what I thought was the answer to the question, and then I would plug the whole thing into ChatGPT and basically say, did I answer the question that the LCME wants to know? And so using that type of tool, because like Corey talked about, like throw something at the wall, see if it sticks. I could put that task to work and ChatGPT is doing its thing and I could move on to the next thing. And then I could come back to that later. And so that for me was like it lifted a load off me trying to constantly edit something like that because it could actively analyze while I was using my brain power to do something else. So that's one area that I've used it a great deal for. I do have some colleagues who have started asking ChatGPT to review their grant and provide an NIH-styled review. And I think I could adopt that. It has been extremely beneficial. Some of the feedback have just been things that four of us could have read it and just missed it because we're familiar with the topic, and ChatGPT would like pull out something that we're like, oh, yeah, that's right. Like we should have addressed that. So that watching that process with some of my colleagues coming on board who are really ingrained in this AI world, I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying learning about it from them and how to use it and how it can make my life easier. So.
Yeah, I mean, right now the AI is inevitable. If you Google search, it will immediately show you the AI version of it. Even you want to avoid it, you can't really avoid it. I think using the AI should be very carefully, because it will give you some misinterpretation there. So we should use the best judgment to use it. But I use it for search some literature in case I miss some citations. When we are writing some review articles, I want to make sure I can cite as many paper as possible. So that was helpful.
The other way that I've used it recently that I found helpful is and I've done the grant review. I think Natalie, we got the tip from the same person probably. Yeah, but it was helpful. I've also used it. I'm a kind of when I make slides for talks, I like to use a lot of like visuals and not a lot of words, and so I've used it to make visuals for talks more recently. I've cited it when I use it, but I found it really helpful rather than messing around with my own attempts at drawing. So.
Oh, and I've also used it in my life. So I don't know if any of you have tried this, but it does a fairly decent job of planning a vacation. So there are some ways that you can offload things from your brain power using those tools that will allow you to focus more readily on your work and the things that you're trying to be creative with, and let it handle kind of those tasks, that maybe you want it done, but you just don't have the time to spend on it. So, but yeah, I recently, some friends of mine and I are planning a trip this summer, and I plugged in all of our favorite things and how long we wanted to be gone and all of this. And then it just generated like 4 itineraries, and it priced out hotels and plane tickets and everything. So it's pretty awesome.
Wow, that's amazing. It's going to put travel agents out of business.
Mhm. Wow. Well, a quick reminder that to our attendees, thank you so much for joining us. We are monitoring the Q&A, so if you have any questions that you want to ask the panelists, please feel free to type it in there, and we will make sure that they get asked. So I wanted to follow up on a lot of the panelists mentioned ways that they use the calendar and calendar tools. Do any of you specifically block the day, block in your calendar your day, and do you assign those blocks to different tasks? And then another question would be, is there a time that you set aside to even block your calendar and to organize your day or your week that way?
Yeah, I mean, I can answer that. For me, when I had deadlines, especially grant deadlines, which we know are immutable, I would essentially just drop everything and just dedicate the time to writing grants. And again, this is before AI. This is before um, like in the early years of my career, there was no internet. So, I still had to go to the library and find all the papers that I needed for writing the grant. But, I would essentially, everybody around me knew that if I'm writing a grant, don't bother me. And, if my husband is around and he'll take care of the kids. And again, everybody in my family knew, don't bother her. She's writing a grant. And everybody in my lab also knew not to interrupt me. But I knew, for example, that there were still things that needed to be done. Like Corey, you said that, for you, doing laundry is as important as other professional activities that you have. So for me, for example, if I had to go pick up the kids, that would be part of my blocking time. And, when my kids came home, if I had to read a book, that was also part of my time management. But during the day, when they were in school or they were at daycare, I certainly would dedicate all of my time to just writing the grant or writing papers or even meeting with people in my lab. But for me, always, whenever I had a grant that was due, that was essentially almost everything that I focused on.
Yeah, so I actually do block out time in my calendar specifically for writing. I am someone who really it takes concentration, and so if I get just I'm easily distracted and squirrel, and so I have 2 mornings a week that I have blocked in my calendar that literally on my calendar say "shut up and write." And so one of those is with a group here within my college that one of my colleagues started. So it's Zoom, and it's based on the Pomodoro principle. So we log into the Zoom, we say good morning to each other, we set a timer, and we log off and we work on and we, stay in the Zoom, but work on our project for about 25 minutes. And then we come back, we take a little break, and we do it again. And that one in particular has been extremely helpful for accountability, because if for some reason I don't show up, one of said colleagues will text me or email me or drop by my office later in the day and go, "Hey, you missed your writing block." And then the other one is self-imposed, just because I need at least 2 periods during my week that are strictly for reading and writing, whether that's a grant, a paper. I'll also use it for data analysis. Sometimes I'll use it just for reading to catch up on literature. That is an area I have honestly struggled with my entire career, is keeping up with current literature. So I use those blocks sometimes just to read. I'll print off a stack of papers. I'm still a paper person when it comes to that. And I'll go through with my little highlighter and read and make notes. So yeah, I dedicate time, at least 2 blocks a week to reading and writing projects.
Yeah, same here. I also block at least one morning, one afternoon, just my writing time. Also, my Monday morning is one-to-one time with all my mentees, so I always block my Monday morning with them. And we have lab meeting time like Wednesday afternoon. That 2 hours is also blocked. And we are all very busy people with clinical research, mentoring, teaching. So I like to remind everyone, just block 30 minutes every day for yourself, just to think about well-being. And I always use that 30 minutes, just do some exercise. Either just walk or just go out and just thinking about what I should do the whole day and what I should do tomorrow. So I found that 30 minutes is very important, at least for myself.
I absolutely block time. It's called Coffee Shop Wednesdays. And actually my mentor has the same day blocked, which has been, I think, really helpful over the years. And I know that my writing and my thinking is best in the morning. I'm an early morning chronotype, so I always preferentially, if I have to move the day around or block another day, I kind of always protect the mornings and save the afternoons for things like email or, things that are less draining, don't require as much brain power. The other thing I would just sort of advocate for, if you're lucky enough to have an administrative assistant help you with scheduling, I think something that professionals who have that available to them aren't necessarily good at utilizing it in the best way possible. So I think it can be a really productive partnership when you work with your administrative assistant to understand your schedule and what works best for you, and then actively work on that sort of over time. It can be tremendously helpful and a big time save.
Thanks so much for those answers. We've got a couple of questions from the audience. So the first one is, some people have brought up productivity tools. Are there any pitfalls or tools that you have tried and that were not helpful? And like if there's anything that you didn't like?
I haven't tried any tools, but I'll just make the one comment. Something that comes to mind as a clinician scientist is early in my career when I was on clinical service, I always set expectations for myself to do research during that time and realized that it was entirely too stressful, a recipe for disaster and failure, made me grumpy when I was on service. So now I really just give myself grace for those weeks and say nothing's going to get done this week. And I find that it helps me to focus on what's really important, which is taking good care of patients and, being with trainees and mentees and things like that, and letting the research for that week slide.
That's actually a perfect segue for another question that one of our audience members asked, which is, how do you fit your non-clinical responsibilities into your clinical work? And I think that's mainly a question for Corey, because she's the physician scientist on the panel. But then for the three PhDs on the panel as well, how do you fit in your administrative versus research work, especially as you get more senior? And then how much of your salary ends up getting driven by those different aspects of your work?
I'll let one of my colleagues go first, and then I can sort of talk about the clinician scientist perspective.
Yeah, so wearing an administrator hat and a research scientist hat and an educator hat, I find that again, I go back to kind of what are our deadlines. So as I roll through an admission cycle for the College of Medicine, I always keep in mind, when wait lists have to be generated, when acceptances have to be sent, when all of these kind of dictated deadlines, and I work backwards. And so what I tend to do is I will have sometimes entire weeks that I am fully dedicated to my admissions role. And within those weeks, what happens to, for instance, Shut Up and Write is that's when I work on admissions documents, EAP acknowledgments. I work also with the Honors College here on our main campus. So sometimes it just becomes that there's a week dedicated here and then a week dedicated there. That's not my preference. I would love to be able to task switch a little bit better, but sometimes that's just what the timeline requires. And so at the end of the day, I kind of end up being 50-50, but just depends on what happens. Last year was a lot of changes in admissions, so I was probably more admissions than research, especially with changes to different laws, especially here in the state of Alabama. So, you kind of have to go with the flow sometimes and realize that, okay, I can't, just like Corey just said about trying to do research during clinical search. No, it's just not realistic. You have to be able to realistically judge your time.
And I can follow up from what Natalie said. I mean, I'm also a PhD, so I don't have any clinical responsibilities. But during the pandemic, I decided to focus more on pipeline programs. I direct two of them. So unfortunately, one of them was terminated. But I really, that was very passionate for me because as a Latina, I really wanted to be a role model for when I was going through graduate school, there was nobody who looked like me or who spoke like me at all. And so I decided, even when I was a graduate student, that I really wanted to become a role model. So I spent a lot of time, especially during the summer when these programs actually take place, kind of focused almost exclusively on these programs. I also was vice chair of diversity and justice in the Department of Medicine for 6 years. And again, unfortunately, because of everything that's happening, that position was eliminated. So all of a sudden, I find myself with a lot of time. And but during the time that I was actually had a lab and was also doing a lot of these administrative responsibilities, I simply would block out the time. Again, I was driven by deadlines, right? So, when my summer program started, it took a lot of legwork and a lot of due diligence to actually get to that point. And as soon as the summer ended, I would then go back and refocus on the research and writing grants, etc. So, I would block out the time depending on what were the priorities during that specific time. Again, my summers were usually the busiest, and so I knew that a priori. So I would then make plans to actually work around my administrative responsibilities. It's not easy, but when I did this, my kids were already grown up, so I didn't have those family responsibilities, which helped a lot. And again, I mean, I have to say that my support system, especially for my husband, I mean, he's been invaluable. We've been married now for 46 years, so whatever we're doing, it's working. So anyway, those are my 2 cents.
I don't have any admin roles so far in our division, but we're trying to apply T32, so I'm gonna be associate director soon. So I will figure out later.
Great. Well, I'd like to pick up on a thread actually that Corey introduced a little bit and talk more about meetings. I think as we move along in our careers, all of us can experience this meeting creep that happens, and you can sort of end your day and realize you spent all day in meetings and didn't cross a single thing off your to-do list. So do you have any thoughts or suggestions about ways to schedule meetings more efficiently, make your meetings when you're in them more efficient so you're not spending as much time in them as you are? And then even politely declining meetings when you're being asked to participate in so many can feel, especially early in your career, it's hard to say no when you're being asked to join in on these.
Yeah, so I'll chime in here. One of the rules I set for myself a few years ago is that I don't attend a meeting without an agenda. I found that, and this actually comes from a close friend of mine who's very involved in business leadership. He teaches some business leadership classes. And basically, we can go to a meeting, and if it doesn't have an agenda, we tend to sit around and just kind of complain. And I'm not a big fan of just finding the problems. I think we're here to find the solutions. And so when I took over as chair of our CQI committee, that committee at that time basically was just kind of reading documents and issuing opinions. And so you'd go in and the administrator for that would have, some things that we discussed. And I finally said, if we don't have an agenda and we're not going to be a decision-making body, I'm not sure we need this committee. And so I kind of streamlined the process. We took our meetings from being 2-hour discussion meetings to 30-minute, hit the high points. These are the things we need to decide. Everyone's provided the materials a week before the meeting, so you have time to read it, issue your opinion. If edits need to be made, that's done in the meeting, but that's it. So the point of the meeting is to make the decisions. The point of the meeting isn't to really have a whole lot of the discussion. In other hats that I wear, for instance, in admissions, those require more discussions. But they have a set agenda and a set time. We are done within a certain amount of time, so it kind of limits the directions that discussions can go. So those are kind of my 2 tips. As far as politely declining a meeting, if anyone on here can please explain to me how to do that, that would be great. I have managed to now politely decline if an agenda is not published, because a lot of people around here have learned that that's a kind of rule. But other things outside of the College of Medicine that I get asked to do, so far I haven't figured out the best way to politely decline. So I'm here to learn as well.
And I can actually echo what Natalie just said. I mean, if there's no agenda, then I won't go to that meeting because it indicates to me that there's really not a plan. And again, as an underrepresented minority, I get invited to be part of a committee just because they need to have, the token minority. And I asked very explicitly, if I am here just because you need to show that, your committee is diverse, then I don't want to be there. I only want to be in committees that will allow me to contribute something, some of my knowledge, some of my expertise, but just to be warming a chair, I just won't do it. Again, I mean, I have learned through my 40 something years of doing this that, you will get asked many times to be in a committee just because they need to show again tokenism, and I just won't do it. You know, I as you get older and more savvy about how valuable your time is, then you say, no, I'm not going to do it. And again, I've been put in positions, especially when I was a young investigator, young faculty member starting out, where I thought I couldn't say no. And, I feel flattered that they want me, but then I go to the meeting and then, you know, there's like 2 or 3 people who are the ones who talk all the time, and you're just sitting there. And I said, this is a waste of my time. So I got savvy through my old age.
I would just say that I think saying no is a superpower, but it has to be a gracious no. And there are certain parts, of your career early on, and to certain people who ask it's not possible. So I think, that's when you need to turn to your mentors and your sponsors and understand, is this something I can say no to? One of my favorite Peloton instructors says, like, if it doesn't raise your vibration or your bank account, the answer is no. And many things in academic medicine don't raise our bank account, but I do think you can say no. I sometimes, especially as I've gotten further along in my career, if there's an opportunity to promote someone who's just emerging, I think that's a really important part of paying it forward. And people understand that and appreciate when you put someone who's trying to kind of make their way into the field forward. As far as productive meetings, I think it's incredibly important. And I think this is where you can go back to really working with an administrator potentially to, do you really need an hour for every meeting? Probably not. Like, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, you could probably get some important action items, and then always leaving a meeting with, okay, these are the next steps. This is what I'm going to do. This is what you're going to do. And we'll meet again in X amount of time.
Yeah, I'd like to add it. Not only meetings. For example, you may get invited to serve as editors, or some of your colleagues may invite you to contributing to a chapter or review articles. So when I first started my first faculty appointment, I first got invited to contributing as in some of the Frontier series. So I just started. It was, I feel intimidated if I say no. So I accepted. So I wrote a quick like how a protocol like article. It was published. Then later another colleague and friend back in Stanford invite me to contribute to a chapter in Frontier. So it's hard to say no. So I accepted. So I contribute to an article there. But just a couple months later, there's another colleague invite to contributing to the Frontier. I was like, no, I just cannot contribute anymore. In about 3 years, I had 2 articles with Frontier. It's just too much. So I just reply very politely and saying, thank you for inviting me. I really want to contribute, but we already contribute 2 articles in the same kind of journal, similar topic. So I'd like to take a break. And my colleague understand that. And also, I also get a lot of articles, journals to invite to serve as an editor. I don't feel I'm ready yet. So I also reply politely and say I'm not ready yet. But maybe a couple years later, I'll feel more prominent to serve that role. I always believe if I take the responsibility, I want to do it well. So that was also my career goal.
Thank you. We have another question from the audience, and it required me to do some reading to be able to ask this question. So the question is on the topic of saying no to things. Have any of the panelists ever used a no committee or committee of no, or seen one used effectively? And they provide a link that I can send out to everyone. But it looks like what this consists of is an odd number of people that you can contact and get an opinion on whether or not you should say no to something or not. And hopefully I'm summarizing that well.
I
Yes.
do this. I don't know that I've ever labeled it as such. And hi, Josh Fessel. It's so good to see you. Or virtually not see you as the case may be. But yeah, I do this all the time. It's like I run things by other people. Like I think I have to say yes to this and get an opinion on it. So
Yeah, I was actually going to say the exact same thing as Corey. Like I didn't know it had a name, but I kind of have just really in the building. I have kind of 3 go-to people who are at different levels of their career, and I will run something by them and get a pretty quick yes or no. Is this worth your time doing? And that I do find that very helpful.
Yeah, same here. I mean, it never was a formalized committee of no or no committee or whatever it is. But again, I mean, having a group of people who I would go to who had a lot more experience than I did, had been in administrative positions for a longer time, then I would ask them, do you think this is worth my time? And but never a formalized committee of no.
Wonderful. I think we're all learning so much, and these are all great tips. So, I have a question now that we have, since the COVID pandemic, a lot of us have transitioned to kind of hybrid work schedules, working from home as well as working in the office. How do you try to prevent spillover of the work into the home life? And how do you put boundaries, especially when, your desk is like 2 steps away from your kitchen sink and like everything else in your life?
I can answer that. I mean, I have a dedicated office in my home and I use that. Again, my kids are grown up, so I don't have the interruptions that I used to have when they were growing up. And, during that time, actually working in the lab or in an office. So, um, and when I am working, everybody knows to stay away from me and they don't interrupt me. So, and I even unplug the phone. I still have a landline, so I unplug it, and everybody knows, she's in a meeting or she's working on something. So, stay away. And again, that may be a little bit cruel, but I think they've learned through the years that they have to walk on eggshells when I'm working and don't interrupt me.
Yeah, I would echo a little bit of what Sonia said. I do have a dedicated office, and it is actually in the back of my house, away from the main room and the main living room, and that helps a lot because I have tried that working at the kitchen table thing. It's not just my family interruptions, my own brain, like I'm 15 other places if I'm sitting in my kitchen. So, and I will also say that my children were much easier to train than my husband. So my kids, like, they got it, pretty quick, especially if my door is actually closed to my office, and they'd be like, oh, we'll come back. My husband was a little harder, and he's still a little harder, but he gets it. It's a look, because when you open my office door, I'm looking at you over my computer screen. And so sometimes the eyeballs are like,
Yeah, even my dog knows to stay away when I'm working.
I also have my own little office in my home. But it's really hard to separate from others. It's always chaotic at home. Um, and since I just started my lab is only 6 years old. I do responding to the emails and texts while during the weekend. But I usually tell my trainees, because sometimes I travel, I just don't know. I don't want to calculate where I am, and the time zone just mess up my calendar as well. So I usually just say, just ignore my text if it's off hour. So they usually know. And but sometimes we have some experiment ongoing on weekend, like hypoxia experiment. We just cannot stop, and then the animal facility will call us. Then I have to pick up the phone and answer. So it just cannot avoid responding to the work during the weekends.
And I, personally, for example, I've been known to go to when my daughters were older and they would be playing volleyball. I would show up with my computer, with my laptop to their volleyball game, and I would actually, if I had to write something when they were not playing, like when they had like a time out or something like that, I would be writing my grants there, and I was there for them, but at the same time, I was also working. So it worked really well, and I got things done, and I was still there for them. So, it's a little bit tricky, but I can actually block everything out when I'm focused on writing a grant or writing a paper or reading something. I mean, I have that ability because I am the oldest of seven, and right, so. I actually trained myself to block all of the noise and all of the chaos whenever I was focused on studying, which was like my priority when I was in high school and college.
yeah, and I'll go back to something Corey actually said about it's not necessarily work-life balance or boundaries. Sometimes it's more about work-life integration. When my kids were younger, so my youngest is a senior in high school, so I'm headed rapidly towards where Sonia is. I can remember sitting out at a soccer field for practice. I don't necessarily need to watch, but I didn't have time to get home and come back and all that. So I would do the same thing. I'd take my laptop, I would climb in the back seat of my car where I had more room, and I'd have papers here, and you just get things done. And I think that goes to Corey's point about sometimes it's integration and getting things done more than boundaries. Now, I will say that when we take a family vacation, that's a hard boundary. We do that time is just for family, and I have been known to go as far as deleting my email app from my phone so that I don't check it and I can actually stay really focused on what we're doing as a family. So family vacation time is a hard no, and everybody here will know it. It'll be on the calendar, it'll be on the lab calendar, it'll be on the admissions calendar. And I will say, either if I'm traveling for work and I'm traveling, you can contact me. If this is family vacation, I'm off the radar, here's a backup. So that's really my only hard boundary.
Yeah, I am the same way. I try to sort of be available, but I think everybody knows there's a couple weeks I go on vacation that I'm not contactable in August. And I try every night around dinner time to be there without, I actually put my phone away very intentionally. I actually don't have, for those of us that are clinicians, I don't have the EMR on my phone. I just try to set some very intentional boundaries, more for my own sanity than anything else. So,
Moving on to like a different topic, do you in the effort of like both advancing others' career as well as yours, do you outsource work? And do you find it helpful to recruit postdocs, residents, as well as undergrads, postdocs? Like how do you try to um, divide the work so that you're helping them but you're also helping yourself without kind of requiring a lot from you on your end?
I'll go back to something actually Corey touched on earlier, which is working in teams. And when you have those meetings, like for instance, a lab meeting, at the end of it, everybody has a task and you know how long you have to achieve that task and then come back. And I think that finishing those types of meetings with a plan of action streamlines how work actually gets done. Sometimes you can leave a meeting and walk out and go, what was I supposed to do? Or who was, and so, yeah, things definitely get outsourced in my lab, especially, postdoc has his role, student has their role, technician has their role, and it has to be a team effort because I can't do all the things. For my admission side, I have a director and an assistant director. And so they each have very unique job descriptions. And so, yeah, those types of work get outsourced so that my role is really ultimately the decision making.
Yeah, I echo what Natalie said. Again, I mean, especially if you're in the middle of writing a paper or writing a grant, then you can go to the people in your lab and say, why don't you spend a lot of time like writing the materials and methods for the experiments that you did so that we can incorporate them in the paper. Obviously, we are the ultimate editors of what goes into what you're publishing. But having people in the lab who can actually work on the figure legend, the description of the experiments that went into those results, I think is very helpful. And to me, that's the extent of the outsourcing that I've done. Most of the time, I work almost exclusively on the writing, but now with the teams and the MPI, where a lot of the grants have MPIs, you're not the sole PI anymore. It's a good idea then to have the other PIs to write sections of whatever grant it is that you're writing. And again, I mean, as the contact PI, you have the ultimate decision-making responsibility, but that's how I outsource some of those things. I'm sorry about, I have a little bit of a cold.
yeah, I think it's really important to set expectations at the outset with the people that you're working with, whether they're trainees or other lab members. And I think there's sort of a contract that you enter, right? When you're mentoring someone, and there's expectations on both sides. And I try to show up as a good mentor, but I also expect my mentees to show up as good mentees. And there could be a little bit of a vetting process around that. I will admit that I kind of have and Navneet knows this, that if I'm approached, that by a student or a trainee that wants to work on a research project, I say, here's some ideas. We sort of pick something they're interested in, and I say, here's your homework. Get back to me after you write up a little, proposal. And many times people will come back and will follow through, and sometimes they don't. But I don't make it a practice to chase folks. I think that then, is a decision that they have made. So I think it's important because you can easily get bogged down in trying to move forward productivity from people that may not be as, aligned or geared towards the same goals that you are. So
Yeah, I echo all the panelists. I think I will turn this outsourced words as more a collaborative way among all the trainees and the fellows. And also for postdoc, I think they already have advanced degree. So for their training, it could be more tailored towards independence. However, for students, undergraduate student, research assistant, they need more structured mentoring. So I will definitely think about some project less risky for them and may turn out to be more easier for them to carry on. Yeah. So it's more like a individual customized mentoring as well.
This has been great. I've been learning a lot listening to all of our panelists, and I hope everyone in the webinar has as well. So we talked a little bit earlier about how to say no to meetings, how to pick the meetings you want to go to. And I think Natalie touched on it a little bit, but I guess the question I'd like to ask you is, do you have any tips for making meetings more efficient? Right? If you are in charge of the meeting or you're an attendee, do you have any ideas about ways to make it run smoothly and really get to the point quickly?
So whenever we had lab meetings, um, everybody would take turns on presenting the work that they had done since the last lab meeting. So that made everything a lot more efficient as opposed to everybody just showing what they've done. So that actually helped a lot. And one of the things that we always did, and again, this was part of the well-being and to avoid burnout as much as possible, is that we always did a check-in the first 5 or 10 minutes of the meeting. And that actually changed the dynamic completely because people knew that we cared about each other. It wasn't just about the research, about the work done in the lab, but rather that, what happened to you this past week that has nothing to do with the lab. And that actually made it very efficient. And if someone started a side conversation, I would simply say, we need to move on, or, if you have something to share with the rest of the group, please do that. And that actually kept the meeting moving ahead. But that was the structure that I had, is the members of my lab would take turns presenting the work that they did again since the last lab meeting.
Yeah, I think over time you develop kind of a group of phrases that you might use to, kind of spur things along, because you also don't want to, if you're leading the meeting and the discussion is fruitful, you don't want to cut off discussion, but you do want to encourage it to stay focused, because we all know, and we've probably done it on this phone call to the people who are listening, we take side quests. So, a few of the phrases I've used are some like Sonia mentioned, this is a great discussion point. This has gone a little off topic. Maybe we should table it and put it in the next meeting's agenda. I mean, that's one I've used frequently, especially in continuous quality improvement, because they're not bad discussions. They just aren't relevant to making today's decision. And so that's where it's helpful to use something like the AI recording for a Zoom meeting, because then you don't forget that needs to be on the agenda, and because you want everyone to feel valued. Otherwise, they shut down and they stop issuing opinions, and then you're a party of one. That defeats the purpose. But moving a discussion along, keeping it focused, being appreciative. I like Sonia's idea of a check-in. I think I've been doing that, and I didn't think of that consciously. But that helps too, because it helps people feel a part, and then they want to give more. But yeah, just phrases that you can use. If any of you guys have some, please share them here. But that's one of mine. This is a really great discussion. I've been known to task people with a subcommittee. This is something that really needs investigating. It needs more time than we have in this primary meeting. Would you mind leading a subcommittee? I'll help you form it.
Yeah, I think having some of those phrases, it's a really important and interesting point. I appreciate your perspective, but for X, Y, and Z reasons, we're going to pivot now towards, I think it's valuable. I also think kind of stating at the outset, this goes back to the agenda. Okay, this is the objective of this meeting. We are going to cover this, but we're not going to cover that. And I appreciate this is a issue you're passionate about, but we're going to table this kind of a discussion to be offline. And I think it's okay to be directed in that way. I think other attendees tend to appreciate when you can keep folks kind of on task and on time. So
For us for lab meetings, we usually ask people to sign up the sheet for the calendar, Google Calendar, and they would know what they gonna present. And usually it's 30 minutes for presentation, and it's Q&A for the rest of the 30 minutes. We just have a fixed 1 hour. Then if it's more one-to-one individual questions, usually the presenter and myself, we will have a 1 hour actual hour as an individual meeting later. So we don't, because other people they running up at any other things. So we just want to keep the meeting short and sweet.
Thank you so much. I have a question that, as someone who's also a mom of little kids right now, it feels like prioritizing myself tends to fall to the bottom of my list oftentimes. I'm like taking care of everybody and all my research and my work before. But are there any rituals or self-care or exercise, anything that any of you do that you make sure you block time for, or how do you prioritize yourself and your well-being?
I'm pretty regimented about exercise. I'm an early riser, so that kind of works out well. And so it's kind of non-negotiable in my family. And my husband knows if I haven't worked out, he doesn't want to face my irritability on the other end of that. So we just work it into our regular family schedule as part of the morning routine. And I think for me, it's critically important for my head space for the rest of the day. So I'm lucky. I have a gym at home, and that's been really a huge time saver. So
Yeah, for me, it's I also am very, very much a morning person. I'm up hours before anyone in my house, even when my kids were little. But mine is more, that's my time for reflection. That is when I think someone asked earlier, we talked a little bit about when do you plan? When do you make your plans? And so for me, that morning cup of coffee, my bullet journal, a little quiet space right now, that's with my Christmas tree lit, which is just wonderful. But that's my time. As far as my exercise, I'm terrible. I'm not near as good at this as Corey, but my exercise tends to come more towards the middle or the end of the day because that's when my brain needs a break. Sometimes that just looks like leaving my office and walking laps around the building, kind of like what Kay was describing. And those I fit in. Sometimes it's a 10-minute walk, sometimes it's a 30-minute walk. It depends on what I can get in, but it gives me a break between projects or a break between what I'm trying to focus on.
Yeah, and for me, again, I also have a gym in the house, so I just if the weather is nice outside, then I'll go and walk 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes. Or if it's bad, which is usually is a lot in Colorado, then I'll just do it in my gym. But for me, to me, I love to garden, which again, I mean, you can only garden, what is it, 4 or 5 months out of the year, Sue, here in Colorado. But whenever we have the gardening months, I absolutely love to be outside planting, gardening. I go and look at my plants every day. And I also love to cook. So, when I cook, I just completely and totally immerse in my cooking. So, those are the things that I do for myself. And, when I'm doing those, I'm not thinking about anything else other than what I'm doing in the moment.
Yeah, I feel when your kids are young and your lab is young, your break time is definitely fragmented. Um, if you can quickly switch your role back, for example, you are mentoring a student, you spend an hour, then the next hour you will be, doing some committee work. So during the break, you only maybe have 5 minutes. Then you want to switch your role quickly, in between the different roles. And I woke up late, but I cannot exercise in the morning. So I like to exercise by the end of the day. So it's really dependent on each person's preference. And I feel like even I only have 15 minutes, even I just watch YouTube videos on cute babies, that's a good well-being for me. Um, yeah.
You have to send us some of those cute baby videos, okay? Another question, switching gears a little bit again. Something we haven't really talked about is taking time off, sabbaticals. Have any of you ever taken a sabbatical or thought about one? And when is the right time in your career to start thinking about them? And how would you recommend planning them?
I've never taken a sabbatical, but I know people who have done that, and especially if they want to retool, for example, learn a new technique, they need to learn a new approach to maybe an intractable problem. And I've known a lot of people who actually go into someone else's lab again because they want to learn something new, and this is the direction they want to take their lab through, but they don't have the expertise. And to me, that's the perfect time to take a sabbatical, especially if you have identified a suitable lab that will take you. So, and that you obviously have the time and the resources to do that. Not all institutions actually pay for sabbaticals, so I think they have to be selected very judiciously.
I'm so the clinical medical school faculty aren't eligible for tenure at Brown, which is a bit of a point of a contention. But I do know people who have taken sabbatical, and I think it can be incredibly rejuvenating. I guess I would just say that I think there's something to be said for every couple of years, like evaluating your job and the ways that you may want it to change, either head in a new research direction or acquiring a new title or position. And because I do think it brings kind of fresh energy and renewal. So
Yeah, so our previous dean didn't believe in sabbaticals, so that was not an option. We are in the middle of a new dean search, so that landscape could change. I think for me, while I've never taken a sabbatical or honestly really considered one, I think just taking time to step back from things that you're doing, even if that's, for instance, a lab retreat, where you identify concerns that you need to deal with in the next 6 months. I think it's kind of a mini sabbatical for your brain, can be very helpful as well. But yeah, I've known people who have taken sabbaticals like Sonia described and gone to another lab and really just completely reinvigorated their career. I think they can be extremely beneficial if you have the opportunity.
Agree. Yeah, I'm also in the hospital. We don't have sabbatical, but faculties in Harvard University or Harvard College, they have sabbatical. I have friends saying many good things about sabbatical. they travel abroad and go to the new labs to study new technology, stuff like that. Yeah, it's a great opportunity if you can have a spectacle.
Well, I can't thank you all enough for this wonderful webinar. I think we've all learned a lot. I think I've just been jotting down notes and things that I took away from this, kind of. I think the biggest thing that we can take away is, give yourself some grace, but also lean on friends and mentors and colleagues and your support network. Kind of like make use of the tools. I think some of us, I know I speak for myself, can get apprehensive about like adopting new technology, but it sounds like a lot of it can be very helpful. So I think we should, take a chance on new things. Blocking time for oneself, blocking time for like one's own catching up on the day, on the tasks, on how to prioritize, setting deadlines for things, and then just making sure that your career as well as your life are aligned and integrated. And if not, then I guess, Corey, your suggestion is like every couple of years, take a look, and then if it's not working, change it, and do that proactively. Don't kind of fall into the slump of like, I don't like what I'm doing now. So again, thank you all. This has been a wonderful webinar. I hope the audience has enjoyed it as much as I have. And we'll be seeing you hopefully in person at ATS for the next women's working group, as well as like other early career working group activities. Thank you all.
Well, thank you for organizing this. This was very illuminating. So thank you.
Thank you and happy holidays,
Thank
everyone.
you for having me.
Holidays all.